There is a difficult truth that almost no one tells you when you're growing up. The harder you try to become a good person, the easier it becomes for others to take advantage of you. It sounds like a contradiction. From the time we are children, we are taught to be polite, to share, to sacrifice, and to put other people's needs before our own. We are praised for being agreeable, admired for always saying yes, and considered mature when we quietly accept the short end of the deal so everyone else can be comfortable. What almost nobody teaches us is that there is a very thin line between kindness and self-abandonment. And if you never learn how to protect that line, life will eventually teach you the lesson in the most painful way possible. You've probably experienced it yourself. You're always the first person people call when they need help. You're the one who stays late to finish the extra work. You're the one who gives up the better seat, the better opportunity, or the easier path so someone else can have it. You're the one who apologizes first even when the mistake wasn't entirely yours. You work hard to become someone who makes everyone around you feel comfortable. Yet somehow, the longer you live this way, the more exhausted you become. Not because you're doing too much, but because you slowly realize that very few people truly appreciate everything you've been giving. What's even more painful is that the people you've sacrificed the most for often begin to treat your generosity as if it were simply expected. They stop saying thank you. They begin expecting more. Then they become disappointed the first time you tell them no. And that's the moment something unsettling becomes impossible to ignore. Some people were never attached to who you are. They were attached to what they could receive from you. That isn't friendship. It isn't love. And it certainly isn't respect. It's simply a relationship built on one person's endless willingness to give while the other quietly learns to take. Many people spend their entire lives trying to become someone that everyone likes. Ironically, the harder they chase universal approval, the further they drift away from themselves. Eventually, they no longer know what they truly want. They no longer recognize what genuinely brings them peace. They hesitate to say no because they fear disappointing someone. They hide their opinions because they fear criticism. They avoid setting boundaries because they're terrified of being called selfish. The strange thing is that society often celebrates people who constantly sacrifice themselves. Yet that same society is usually the first to forget them the moment they can no longer keep giving. This is a paradox Seneca recognized more than 2,000 years ago. He never argued against kindness, nor did he encourage people to become cold, distant, or emotionally detached. What he warned against was something far more dangerous: kindness without wisdom, kindness without boundaries, kindness that slowly trades away your inner peace in exchange for other people's approval. Seneca once suggested an idea that remains deeply relevant today. He who is everywhere is nowhere. Most people interpret those words as advice about time, but they also describe the tragedy of a life spent belonging to everyone except yourself. If you're always available for everyone else, sooner or later you stop being present for your own life. If you spend all your energy solving everyone else's problems, who will be there to heal yours? If every important decision begins with the question, "What will they think of me?" when will you finally ask yourself what you think? This is the hidden trap behind excessive kindness. People like this don't always give because they're free. Very often they give because they're afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing someone, afraid that saying no will make them less lovable. Over time, that fear quietly puts on a disguise. It begins calling itself kindness. Eventually, the disguise becomes so convincing that even they can no longer tell the difference between genuine compassion and fear-driven self-sacrifice. That's why so many people wake up every morning already emotionally exhausted. Not because life is necessarily harder than it used to be, but because they've spent years carrying expectations that were never truly theirs to carry. Meanwhile, their own hearts grow quieter, emptier, and harder to hear. There is a question that very few people are brave enough to ask themselves. If tomorrow you stopped trying to make everyone happy, how many people would still choose to stay in your life? It is an uncomfortable question. But uncomfortable questions often reveal the deepest truths, because the reality is this: not everyone loves you for who you are. Many people love the version of you they can benefit from. They love the version that always says yes, the version that never complains, the version that apologizes first, the version that is always available whenever they need something. But the moment you begin protecting your boundaries, the moment you politely decline a request, the moment you choose your own health, your own peace, or your own priorities, something fascinating happens. Some people become disappointed. Some become irritated. Some even accuse you of changing. But pause for a moment. Maybe you haven't changed at all. Maybe the only thing that has changed is that they no longer have unlimited access to your generosity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Think about that carefully. If every morning your first thought is how to avoid disappointing someone, if every important decision begins with worrying about how others might react, your mind slowly becomes stained with anxiety. Instead of living according to your principles, you begin living according to other people's expectations. That is an incredibly dangerous way to live, because other people's emotions are never yours to control. Today they appreciate your effort. Tomorrow they expect even more. Today they thank you. Tomorrow they assume it's simply your responsibility. If your sense of worth depends on keeping everyone satisfied, then you've handed the steering wheel of your life to people who will never be responsible for your happiness. Epictetus reminded us of a timeless truth. It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments concerning them. The pain doesn't come from saying no. The pain comes from believing that saying no makes you a bad person. That belief rarely appears overnight. Sometimes it begins in childhood. Sometimes it grows inside families where love feels conditional. Sometimes it develops after years of being praised only when you're useful, obedient, or agreeable. Little by little, you learn that pleasing others feels safer than expressing yourself. You learn to swallow your frustration. You learn to smile while quietly carrying resentment inside. Eventually, you mistake this pattern for maturity. But is it really maturity? Or is it simply a survival strategy you've carried for so long that you've forgotten it was never meant to become your identity? Think about the people you genuinely admire. Are they kind? Of course they are. But they never sacrifice their dignity just to earn approval. They know how to listen, but they also know how to decline. They show compassion, but they refuse to let compassion become self-destruction. They are willing to help, but they don't believe it's their responsibility to rescue everyone. And that is the difference between being kind and being addicted to pleasing people. A kind person acts from values. A people pleaser acts from fear. One gives because they genuinely choose to. The other gives because they cannot bear the discomfort of refusing. From the outside, they may look almost identical, but internally, they live in completely different worlds. One experiences peace. The other lives under constant pressure. They fear rejection. They fear criticism. They fear abandonment, and those fears quietly trap them inside an endless cycle. Give. Become exhausted. Feel unappreciated. Then give even more. Not because they don't recognize the pattern, but because deep inside they believe that if they ever stop giving, they will stop being worthy of love. That may be one of the most dangerous lies the human mind can ever believe. Real strength begins the moment you stop measuring your worth through other people's approval. The Stoics never asked us to become emotionally cold. They asked us to become emotionally free. Freedom is not refusing to help. Freedom is helping without abandoning yourself in the process. You can be compassionate without becoming available to everyone who demands your energy. You can say no without becoming selfish, and you can choose yourself without betraying anyone. Because every meaningful relationship becomes stronger when generosity is offered freely instead of fearfully. Respect grows where honesty exists, not where silent resentment quietly accumulates beneath forced kindness. Perhaps today is the day you stop apologizing for protecting the peace that keeps your soul alive. Perhaps today is the day you finally discover that boundaries are not walls but wisdom. Because the person who deserves your kindness most has quietly been waiting inside you all along. If this message spoke to you, share your thoughts below and subscribe to continue exploring timeless Stoic wisdom together.